The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, Julie Budd, is making her sophomore appearance here on the Paul Leslie Hour. She's a cabaret singer, an actress, a performing and recording artist. In fact, Julie Budd is going to be appearing in concert May 1st through the 4th, 2019. That's Wednesday to Saturday at the Birdland Theatre in New York City. The show is entitled The Songs of My Life and the Composers Who Wrote Them. Julie Budd, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me back.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
So, with the title of this concert that you're doing, how important are songwriters to Julie Budd?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question because when we were thinking about putting the show together, it became kind of a thought, what will we do this time? I haven't been here in New York in about 3 years. I can't believe how time flew by. It's been 3 years. And I thought, how do I want to say hello again to the audience, And I was thinking to myself, what really brings us here? And what brings us here, what brings me here for sure, is the fact that I've been so lucky to have known marvelous, talented people throughout my entire career. I'm singing since I'm 12 years old. And I started thinking about all the talent that I grew up knowing. Julie Stein and Irving Caesar and Cy Coleman and Dorothy Fields and, Marvin Hamlish, Michelle Legrand, the new people like Mark Shaman and, people like that. I just thought to myself, and my composer, orchestrator Herb Bernstein and Steve Dorff and Artie Butler and Charlie Fox and all these wonderful people. And I thought to myself, when you really think about it, if a singer is not an actively busy composer, if their career is not about what they compose, it's about songs that they interpret. Really, you owe everything to the folks that give you something to do when you get up there and go to work. And what's really great about it is that I knew all these people. So I'm just not, picking a composer I like people will do an evening of Sondheim, or they'll do an evening of Andrew Lloyd, and they've never been in the room with these people. But I knew all of these brilliant, wonderful, generous people. And I wanted to pay tribute to them, and that they've been so good to me over the years.
So tell us a little more about this show that you're doing, this particular one. Is there maybe a song that you perform that, in particular, the audience just always seems to be spellbound by?
That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. It's not always the most obvious piece of material that happens with. Sometimes you would think that would happen with the hugest number in the show, or the most famous song, and everybody goes, "Oh, I love." There's a song called "Little Boy of Mine," and it was written by my conductor, Herb Bernstein. Whenever I do that song, wherever I do that song, I could do it in France, I could do it in Brooklyn. It doesn't matter. Wherever I do it, it seems to connect to people in a very, very personal way. And it's interesting how it's not a song that was a hit, and it's not a song that was in a movie, although it could be. It's an obscure piece, and yet it has that effect on people. Not that the other songs don't, but it sort of fills a very personal moment. And people come up to me all the time after the show, and they ask me, "Oh, where could I get that song?" And I tell you, I've recorded it. But it's funny how it's not always the most obvious piece. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And I like that it's that way, because it opens the door to discovering something in a show that ordinarily, you wouldn't think that would be the case. Live performance is like that. And that's why I like working live, and I like putting shows together, because even though you could be in the business over 50 years, as I am, you're always surprised by what happens. You never know how to read something. You think you do, and your experience tells you some things, but in truth, you never really know what's going to happen. It's a little bit like a free-floating experience. Do you know what I mean? It really is.
It's like the element of surprise is a factor.
It is always the element of surprise. And I'll tell you something else about live performance that's funny about what you just said, the element of surprise. From night to night, you never know how it's going to go. The energy is, it's really funny. The energy in the auditorium, in the concert hall, in the venue, wherever you're performing, is different from night to night. And you're different from night to night. It's so interesting. I wonder if there's been a book written about this. Because it really is. It's very interesting.
Maybe there needs to be.
Yeah. Get busy, kiddo. Get busy.
At the beginning of the interview, you were listing a lot of these composers and lyricists, and it was occurring to me that so many of those songwriters were songs that were also recorded by Frank Sinatra. He used a lot of these songwriters that you mentioned, and I was just listening to Remembering Mr. Sinatra, your album.
Thank you for listening to it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, it's a great collection.
Thank you so much. Well, I didn't want to imitate or try to be like. I worked with Mr. Sinatra, and I got to know him. And so I wanted to do material that I remembered that was performed in the shows, and I wanted to do them as organically and as truthfully as I could. I didn't want to imitate anything, and because there are so many people that do Sinatra material that try to do it the way he did it and take on the persona of him, and I'm not really a fan of that kind of work. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I don't think Mr. Sinatra was either, to be honest with you. As a matter of fact, he said to me, he made me promise, could you believe this? He made me promise him when I was 16 years old that I would continue to do these songs. And I remember him saying to me, Julie, if you don't do it, and if your generation doesn't do it, it's going to be as if it never happened. He said, and that's just the way legacy is. You have to pass the baton. You have to keep doing the material. And even if you decide to do it slightly differently, you have to do the material or no one will know it was ever here. And he made me promise that. I don't know if you knew that, but he made me promise him that I would continue to do this material.
What would you say is the greatest lesson you learned from Sinatra?
Well, there were a lot of things. He was a very complicated man. And it wasn't because he wasn't a nice person. On the contrary, he was a very nice person. But fame, it taught me something at such a young age. Fame is complicating, and it complicates your life. And once you become legendary on that level, nothing is ever going to be the same again. And I think, quite frankly, I think he wore it all very well. Even with all the stories that people had about him and the things that people said, which half of it probably wasn't even true. The thing that I learned about Frank Sinatra, he wore it all pretty well when I think about it. And he had a lot of integrity when it came to his work. He never just relaxed and said, hey, I'm famous and I'm going to show up and they're going to be glad I'm there, so, I could relax with all of this now. That was not the way he approached his work. I did not see that as being so. He was just as committed and just as serious about each show and each performance, later in his career as he was, if he was a young guy just starting out and, carving his way, his pathway. He never relaxed with that. And that was the thing I actually loved about him. And another thing that I loved about him was that he was very cognizant about putting great people around him. I don't know how many shows that you saw that he, actually did live, but I noticed in every show, he always thanked the people around him. And maybe that's what I'm doing a little bit in this show that I'm doing at Birdland in May, that I'm thanking the people around me, the writers, the producers, the lyricists. That's something that Mr. Sinatra would have done. And he did that in all of his shows. He always thanked the musicians, and he would always say, this is a terrific, Rodgers and Hammerstein song, and this is a great Cole Porter piece. And he would thank people that the mainstream audience didn't know. Like he would say, this is a fantastic Don Costa arrangement. Had it not been for Frank Sinatra thanking a lot of these behind-the-scenes people, it's possible that the average public that buys the records wouldn't even know who these folks were. And he created a sort of forum for them. And I think that's what I like the most about him. And it's funny, I didn't even realize it until I was saying it to you just now, but I think that's kind of what I'm doing in this show. That's very much what I'm doing.
Getting back to the show you were just mentioning a second ago, and again, for all the listeners, it's May 1st through the 4th, and that's going to be at the Birdland Theatre in New York City, 7 o'clock p.m. I want you to tell us a little bit about that venue.
Yeah, it's their new theater. They have two venues. They have the one upstairs, which is basically their jazz room. And they put a lot of the big bands in that room. And, they do those kinds of shows there. And then downstairs, there's a theater. There's a beautiful little theater. It's brand new. And by the way, I should tell all your listeners that the menu is fantastic. They have a wonderful kitchen. And all you folks that are listening, if you feel like coming, and I hope you do, you could have dinner there. It's kind of like, remember the old-fashioned supper clubs?
Oh, yeah.
But it's a theater. It's a beautiful little theater with a beautiful stage, and of course I'll be bringing my musicians. But it's an intimate, elegant, very clean, beautiful, brand new venue, and it's called the Birdland Theatre. And as I said, if it's a 7 o'clock show, you could show up at 6 o'clock or 5:45, and you can have a full dinner, beautiful menu, great desserts, and they have a really fine chef. And then you could sit and reminisce about some of these wonderful writers with me and enjoy the music. And you can have this beautiful full evening, and everything's in one spot. You don't have to run around for it or worry, where am I going for dinner? And they don't rush you out after the show. You could take your time and have your dessert. And I actually come out after the show, and sign the CDs and meet everybody after the show. So it's a very, very warm and inclusive evening. I would think it's got to be a treat for the audience to have that kind of night.
Well, as Shakespeare said, if music be the food of love, play on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope you'll be there.
Well, unfortunately, I'm in Atlanta for the next couple of weeks. So
Are you? I love Atlanta, by the way.
you'll have to come down sometime.
I want to. I love Atlanta. Years ago, when I was a kid, I used to play at a place. I don't know if it's there anymore. Everybody played there. Joan Rivers played there, and David Brenner played there, and I played there. It was a great place. Clint Holmes played there. It was called the Hyatt Regency, and they had a room there. And everybody came in, whoever passed through Atlanta. It was on Peachtree, I think it was.
Yep.
And, and it was a great room. And we all used to play there. And then I worked the Fox Theatre, believe it or not. I'll tell you how many years ago it was. I was a kid with Red Skelton. Could you believe it?
Wow.
Yeah, that was at the Fox Theatre. Beautiful, beautiful landmark theater. And, of course, they have a wonderful symphony there. I like Atlanta. I'd love to come back to Atlanta.
Now, you work with singers sometimes. And I'm hoping you can tell us, because we probably have a lot of people listening who are singers.
You mean in the coaching capacity?
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that singers make?
Well, any performer, I think, when they push, when they want to please too much and they lose connection with themselves. And it can hurt your instrument in a lot of ways to do that. I think the most important thing to do is to rehearse like you're a mad woman, like it's your last day on earth, and get it to the point where you're so now at home with your material and you feel confident to get up and do it, and that it belongs to you. You understand it. You've discovered it. You've worked on it on many, many, many deep levels, not just vocally, but emotionally and orchestrally, and in all the ways that you really need to really be at one with the piece. And then go out there and just trust yourself. And that's the biggest thing that performers, actors, dancers, it really doesn't matter what area you are performing in. You really need to trust yourself that you've done your work and now go out and do it. And it's the hardest thing for a performer to do. And it takes a long time to settle in with material. Sometimes it can take years to settle in with pieces. But you have to trust yourself. And young performers, not just young performers, but even people who are seasoned professionals, you have to trust that you've done your work and that you believe in it, and you're going to go out there and you're going to connect with it on the deepest level that you can. Sometimes you get students that, it's all sell, and push, and, you have to convey to them that it's not just how great you sing or the sound that you could make that could be incredible, but it's how you connect to that work. Because at the end of the day, it's really about moving people and connecting with an audience. And whether you're on film or television or live, it's always about making that connection. And you can't lose sight of that. And that takes a long time to learn. And like I said, you could be a seasoned professional, but you always have to check in with yourself with that. It's a very important thing to do, or you don't really have anything to do at all.
You're very well spoken.
Well, thank you.
If you could sing a duet with any living person, who would it be?
Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett. I'd like to work with Tony Bennett. It's so funny. I know Tony Bennett. He's a lovely man. And I've worked with Mr. Sinatra, and, you know, I worked with so many other fine artists and performers over the years. But I never worked with Tony Bennett. So he should really call me, don't you think?
That would be great. I would love to hear that.
I would too. I think that he would get it with me, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Richard Skipper for setting this up, and Julie Budd, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Don't we love Richard Skipper? Don't we just love Richard Skipper? And yes, we do want to tell everybody that it's the Birdland Theatre, and that's 315 West 44th. And you could have dinner there, and you could come see my show, and you can say hi to me after the show. And it's May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd, May 4th. And all the shows, all the concerts are at 7 p.m. So you could be home by 8, 9 o'clock. Not bad, huh?
Not bad. And your website, it's juliebudd.com. And yes, I do love Richard Skipper.
Yes, and they can visit me on Facebook too. They can visit me
right.
Yeah, lots of Facebook fans and lots of friends. We chat. And yes, Richard Skipper is the greatest. You've done interviews with Richard, right?
I did one with him, yes. Absolutely.
He's terrific.
I made, the I Love New York logo?
Yep.
I made one time that said, I love Richard Skipper.
Well, he's the mayor of New York. He's just the best. He's just the best. All of our listeners should know Richard Skipper is the mayor of New York City. De Blasio really works for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I wish you a wonderful day, and I'm sure the concerts are going to be fantastic.
Thank you so, so much again for having me on. And even though I know you're going to be in Atlanta, I hope that next time you come back to New York, you'll come and say hi to us at the next concert.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Have a great weekend.
And you too.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Ba 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 da beep ba boop da boop da beep ba da leap ba knock at the bees. I walk on teach a girl a get it. No, it's a got one is in and got a kiss. I got oh, is it? I'm swagging. I believe it's a good, but don't talk about again. Goodbye.